Hi everyone, welcome to our next Master Lecture in the GoFly Master Lecture Series. It's my pleasure once again to introduce founder and CEO of GoFly, Gwen Leiter.
Thank you, Nidhi, and thank you everyone for joining us today. As you all know, our grand sponsor of the GoFly Challenge is Boeing. We are also joined by corporate sponsor Pratt & Whitney, as well as our in-kind sponsors who provide free and discounted software services and product directly to all of our teams. In addition, we are joined by organizational partners around the world who help our teams as well. And today we are very pleased to welcome Tess today. Tess is an investor in Bessemer Venture Partners Silicon Valley office. She is focused on frontier tech, specifically commercial space, cybersecurity, and drones. Tess currently serves as a board observer for Iris Automation, Impossible Aerospace, Rocket Lab, and Spire. She holds a bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering from University of Michigan and a master's degree in aeronautics and astronautics engineering from Stanford. She was a mission manager at SpaceX, where she worked with the government on integrating their payloads with the Falcon 9 rocket. And she also worked at Fictive, a startup using 3D printing and CNC machining to democratize access to manufacturing, all of which are technologies and experience that are directly relevant to all of you, our GoFly teams. And so without further ado, so happy to welcome Tess Hatch to give today's master lecture.
Thank you so much, Gwen. Please let me know when you see my slides.
Looks great.
Wonderful. Imagine a future where one travels to space with the frequency that we currently travel in an aircraft. I'm passionate about the commercialization of space exploration and hope that we'll all travel to space one day. And that extends to VTOL or vertical takeoff and landing or flying cars. And I love the vision of GoFly. And thank you, Gwen, and the team for having me today. As Gwen said, I have my bachelor's in aerospace engineering from the University of Michigan, Go Blue, master's from Stanford in Aero Astro, and various work experience as a mission manager at SpaceX, as a structural engineer at Boeing, working on metal 3D printing, Northrop Grumman, and NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, as you can see Curiosity in the bottom right corner. I'm now an investor at Bessemer, a venture capital firm in the Bay Area and globally. And in addition to investing in deep tech such as space and drones, we invest in enterprise, healthcare, and consumer companies around the world. And some of the logos that you may recognize on the screen are portfolio companies of ours like Yelp, LinkedIn, and Pinterest. And we love partnering early with entrepreneurs and helping them grow into market-leading businesses. Since our founding, we've had 122 of our companies that have gone public. We have offices around the world, 2 in the Bay, 2 on the East Coast, Israel and India. We have over $5 billion of assets under management, over 200 current portfolio companies. And right now we're investing out of our 9th $1.6 billion fund. We just announced our 10th $1.85 billion fund. And this provides seed and Series A stage investing and funding as large as $100 million into later stage rounds. That was a lot of jargon. So I hope to explain all of that during this talk. Venture capital is a bit of a black box. So I'd love to go through the details of what VC is, including types of VCs, how to pitch to VCs, and the inside knowledge of how an investor thinks through making an investment or a decision. And I'd also love to share my drone roadmap or thesis on the industry and the drone investments we've made, which specifically will relate to the GoFly mission. Please, I look forward to all of your questions. I don't think you can interrupt me during it, but if you have a burning desire, I look forward to answering them. And I hope at the end, all of you will have a better understanding of what venture capital is, and specifically if it's a good fit for your company's future. Great. I'm going to start with, what does a venture capitalist do? I break my job into 4 categories: deal sourcing, due diligence, portfolio company support, and road mapping. The first, deal sourcing, is sort of like what it says. It's networking, going to demo days, accelerators, seed investors, basically going out and chatting with as many folks as possible and hoping to meet extremely smart and bright entrepreneurs. When I meet one of those exciting companies, I go into due diligence, which is sort of like acting like a private investigator. And I want to dig into all of these things regarding the company. And I'll go into much more detail about this later, but at a high level, tell me about your team. Why are you, your co-founders, your entire team, whatever stage you're at, unique in your ability to solve this problem? What is the problem that you're solving, or what technology have you developed or product to solve this problem? And how large is the problem? Normally that's measured in TAM, or total addressable market, and that's valued as dollars or people that are really stuck and will pay for a solution. Speaking of paying, who are those people? Who are your customers? What is your sales pipeline, either current and projected? And that's if you have revenue generated as annual recurring revenue or just normal revenue if it's not a recurring subscription model. CAC, which stands for customer acquisition cost, how much it takes your company, how much you have to pay to acquire a customer. LTV, lifetime value of the customer, how much that person will pay your company throughout the lifetime of them using your tech or your product. And if you're a pre-revenue generating company, tell me what you expect or hope. You don't have to have years of financial data when you're an early stage company, or if it's just 2 of you and an idea. These are all hypothetical or the potential future. And don't worry, hopefully it's fairly realistic, but it's my job to figure that out. Tell me about your competition. Having competition is not a bad thing whatsoever. It's actually, if you've found a problem that is that large, other smart people will have recognized and noticed that problem as well and will be looking for a solution. Just tell me who else is out there and why your solution is better or different. If you are a later stage company and have all the financials, historical and projected, or have raised a previous round of funding, please tell me about that via your cap table. So the ownership of the company and how many primary and secondary shares you have amongst you, your profit and loss, balance sheet, all of the various cash flow analysis, financials that your company has generated. And then lastly, I'm assuming the point of our meeting today was because you're looking to raise some money. So tell me how much you're raising, how much you've raised in the past, and how much you hope to raise in the future. I will go into further detail about this specific slide later when I talk about knowing your VC and what should be in your pitch deck. But at a high level, this is the information. Back to the third part of what a venture capital investor does is we help and support portfolio companies after an investment. So I sit as board observer to all of the companies on the screen. Gwen mentioned Iris automation, which is a sense and avoid system for drones acting analogous to the pilot's eyes, and it is able to detect, classify, and determine if an evasive maneuver needs to be made to get out of the way of other objects in the airspace. Impossible Aerospace, whose mission is to electrify air travel starting with a drone with over 2 hours of battery life, Rocket Lab, which is a low Earth orbit launch vehicle, basically a tiny rocket that takes satellites under 200 kilograms or even CubeSats, which are the size of tissue boxes, to low Earth orbit, which is about 500 to 1,200 kilometers, whizzing around the Earth every 90 minutes. And Spire, which is one of those tissue-sized satellites or CubeSats. It's a constellation of general purpose CubeSats with 3 sensors: an AIS sensor for naval tracking, ADS-B sensor for plane tracking, and a GPS radio occultation sensor for weather data. And the handful of other logos on the slide are cybersecurity companies that I won't go into detail in this setting. But what's important here is that I try to support these companies with various things, whether it's hiring talent, raising a future round of fundraising, diversity and inclusion initiatives, but mostly being a supportive sounding board for the company, no matter what they're going through, the highs and the lows, and especially the lows. And what is interesting being on the outside and observing and viewing all of these is that something Claroty is going through could potentially help Auth0. And seeing that pattern recognition that each and every company faces as they scale can help cross-pollinate one another. The fourth thing a VC does, and this is one of my favorite and unique to Bessemer, is we are roadmap-driven investors. So there's 2 types of investors. There are generalists and there are industry-specific or roadmap investors. A generalist is sort of what it sounds like. They do not have any specific focus of investment industry, and they invest in everything. And that makes a lot of sense to me at the seed stage when it's super early, it's 2 people and an idea, and you're really investing in those people. But I prefer to invest at the Series A and really like the structure of a roadmap. And some of our roadmaps include space and drones, so aerospace, which is a roadmap I work off of. And this isn't to say that we sometimes miss out on awesome companies or talent. I'm going to diverge for a second, but one of the Bessemer on our website, in addition to listing our portfolio companies, which has the amazing logos that you saw on the second slide, such as Yelp and LinkedIn and Pinterest and Blue Apron and Twilio, we list our anti-portfolio, all of the companies that we passed on, and the reason as to why. So some of those logos include Google, Tesla, Snapchat, Airbnb, a very entertaining read. Humility is one of our cultural values, so I definitely recommend checking that site on our website. I diverge. Back to road mapping. What I enjoy about the industry-specific or roadmap is that we think these areas are going to be extremely fruitful in the future, and therefore we're placing investments in them now. And each investor at Bessemer is subject matter experts in that industry roadmap, has understood the history of the industry, where it's at today, all of the current players or companies that are working in the space today, and where we think that the future will turn to make those investments. And this part of my job obviously allows me to use my aerospace background to whether it's digging into the rocket equation or figuring out if those link budgets work with that satellite, or the CFD of the propellers that a drone company is facing. After explaining what I do every day, there's important details that an entrepreneur should know about the specific VC that they're reaching out to determine if it'll be a good fit. So it's important to know your VC. And there's 3 things that you should know: the size, stage, or type. The size is it a 50 million seed fund? Is it a 1.85 billion fund? Is it an angel investor with 200, 500,000? So the size of the company's fund is a very helpful indicator because most venture capitalists want one of their investments to return the size of the fund. So the market of that industry needs to be at least 10x the size of the fund. While the size of the fund is one helpful indicator, also to know the stage at which the venture capital normally likes to invest. Although Bessemer is a $1.85 billion fund, we love to invest at the Series A stage, if not before. So while it's a massive fund and you're not going to be raising that much at your Series A typically, we still like to partner with you at that stage so that we can have the dry powder to continue throughout your journey. And maybe this would be a helpful time to explain this, probably should have done this before, the order of the rounds. So as you're going out to raise, most companies will start with a friends and family round, which is either their or their friends and family's money. The next step would be an angel investor. Angel investors are usually individuals or an aggregation of individuals that invest super early in companies. And that's usually less than $1 million, but it can get up to $1 million. Then we have pre-seed or seed VCs and investors, and that's sort of getting you off the ground. And then you have Series A, B, C, D. You go as many letters as you need until the company either goes public or is acquired or unfortunately decides to no longer continue. And that's, of course, throughout any part of this journey. The stage is that the type of investor. So type is in my opinion or definition, is it a financial, is it a typical VC or is it a strategic VC? And then I know you guys spoke with Brian at Boeing's Horizon X earlier in the series. And Brian is at a strategic corporate VC, which is Boeing has given Horizon X a fund to go invest in technology that will complement or help or support Boeing in some way. Some of them are looser than others. I don't have any corporate that I am associated with. My job is to return on my investment to my LPs or my limited partners that are providing the 1.85, and that's an aggregation of a whole pool of people. So I'm really just looking out to invest in great people and technology that'll make an impact on the world, but will also hopefully return a lot of money. The second thing, the venture capitalists' portfolio companies, or if they're roadmap or industry-specific investors, what are the industries they've invested in? What's extremely important to note about the portfolio companies is I cannot and will not invest in a competing company to a company in my portfolio, so a conflict of interest. So for example, I'm an investor in Rocket Lab, a low Earth orbit launch vehicle. So I will not invest in any of its competitors. So those companies should not approach Bessemer because we can't invest in a conflicting technology. So before reaching out, look at the VC's portfolio company list, and if you directly compete with a company already in their portfolio, I wouldn't recommend reaching out or asking them if, hey, because especially angel investors, they'll invest in a variety of companies. Reach out to them and ask if that would be appropriate. And then the industries. If the VC has never invested in a VTOL or a drone company or an aerospace company, you might be doing a lot of educating to get them up to speed on the market and the technology, as opposed to a VC that spent a ton of time in the space. Not saying that you can't approach them, but just saying it might be more difficult for them to get to an investment into your company. So know the industries and the time the VC has spent. And then lastly, know who that person is. As important as it is to know the firm, it's even more important to know the individual that you are targeting within the firm. And secondly, as important and as much as you would like the funds and would like this money from the venture capitalist, it is a partnership. You're looking for a great person or a great partner that will be able to deliver strategic value to you and your company for years to come. They'll probably be involved at the board level, and you want a really great person. So make sure that it's a mutual conversation and relationship. What do we want to know? I went into this at a high level on the previous slide regarding due diligence. At a very high level, there's 4 things: problem, solution, customers, and team. The problem is usually measured in the market size or the total addressable market. The solution is described as the product or tech that you're developing. Customers, so how many and how much are they paying for your solution, measured in sales or customer pipeline. And the team, why you're unique, and brag on you and your awesome background and team and company. There's should be hopefully only a handful of people in the world that even can understand how this technology works or the secret that you've discovered in the industry. And don't be shy to share that. That's definitely your competitive advantage. Other things are why now? So timing comes into this. This is a lot of questions venture capitalists ask. How you hope to get there. So your go-to-market, product marketing fit, all of those various things. And then how much you're raising, how much you've raised in the past, how much you hope or think to raise in the future, and what you'll use with those proceeds. Something that, when I explained earlier, the seed versus series letters and growth rounds, the timing between that is about 1.5 to 2 years. So you want to, so let's say 1 to 2 years, you want to raise a round of venture capital funding every 1 to 2 years. So therefore, it's very important to set realistic goals that you'll accomplish with this round of funding, so that even if the venture capitalist passes and says, hey, I'd love to chat in a year, you can go back in a year and said, hey, on October 31st, happy Halloween, 2018, I said to you that I was going to accomplish X, Y, and Z. It's now October 31st, 2019, and I accomplished X, Y, and Z, and maybe even did W, or didn't get there exactly, need 2 more months, but I'll do it then. So making sure that you have milestones within each round of funding is very helpful. That's, I think, the biggest takeaway that I take from most meetings is I note what they say that they'll do, and I hold them to it. Now, I'd love to share with you our drone roadmap and the associated investments that we have made in this drone space. And I hope specifically this technology and in context can help in your GoFly journey. So when I first started digging into the drone industry, or unmanned aerial vehicle, and manned vehicle as well, actually, I did speak to a lot of the people carrying VTOL technology. And I really enjoyed chatting with all of the incredibly brilliant and smart entrepreneurs. I think that's my favorite part of the job, is just learning from folks like yourself. And whether they were building drones for carrying people or using the data to analyze or building a commercial drone, they were all restricted by one thing, and that was regulation. And specifically, Part 107 regulation that restricts an object in the sky from flying above people, but mostly flying beyond visual line of sight, BV loss. And right now, regulation is the current barrier in the drone industry. I think that once this issue is resolved, it'll grow into the $100 billion market that some forecast. So therefore, we're we focused an investment on the technology that helps solve this regulatory hurdle. And you can imagine this doesn't affect consumer drones as much as it affects commercial drones. It's potentially fatal if you are hoping to use your drone to inspect hundreds of miles of oil pipeline or train track, or deliver a package, or inspect hundreds of acres of agriculture or farm, or the many other applications. So this led to our investment in Iris Automation, which is a BVLOS, or Beyond Visual Line of Sight, sense and avoid system for drones. So it's a camera that acts analogous to a pilot's eyes that sits on the drone and is fed into a deep learning algorithm that is able to detect, classify, and determine if an evasive maneuver needs to be made. So it sits on one drone and can see in the airspace, oh, is that a balloon, a blimp, a bird, another drone or plane flying at me, and then determine if this drone needs to get out of the way. This is a video of Alex Harmson, the CEO, explaining an impressive accomplishment the Iris team accomplished earlier this year. So I'm going to let this 2-minute video play.
Hello, my name is Alex Harmson, CEO of Iris Automation. We're a computer vision company building collision avoidance systems for drones, and we're here out in Reno to witness a historic test. The first closed-loop sense and avoid system with a real manned aircraft. We've used artificial intelligence and traditional computer vision to build a sense and avoid system that's capable of detecting other aircraft and keeping these drones safe. This entire industry needs beyond visual line of sight flights, as drones get used for mining operations, for oil and gas, railroad inspection, even package delivery. None of this exists without Iris Automation. Embedded onboard sense and avoid systems that are capable of acting completely autonomously will be the key to unlocking this entire beyond visual line of sight drone industry. As the aircraft comes into the field of view, the system automatically detects, tracks, and classifies what exactly this intruder aircraft is, and then automatically computes an avoidance action, engaging the autopilot to take it out of the air down to some safe altitude as soon as it possibly can. Only this closed-loop action will allow these drones to really stay safe as they navigate the national airspace. When we're talking about deploying a system like this to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of drones, we want to make sure that it works. We've taken a team from NASA, Boeing, Airbus, self-driving car companies, and real pilots to make sure that we've engineered this solution to work in any situation. This test is a big milestone along the way to making this technology omnipresent. We have an active early adopter program and are continuously looking for more companies to join us on this effort. We want to work with customers, regulators, and other partners to ensure that we build safe technology and to make sure that these types of sense and avoid systems truly become the backbone of the entire drone industry worldwide.
Furthermore, we predict the next barrier in the drone industry will be flight time. So the current drone hardware that's dominating the industry, DJI, can only fly for 20, 30 minutes and is manufactured in China. So in light of all the commercial applications that were mentioned earlier, like inspecting the hundreds of miles of oil pipeline or railroad tracks, 30 minutes of flight time is not really realistic. Therefore, Impossible Aerospace has created a drone with over 2 hours of flight time. It's also engineered and assembled in the United States, which alleviates the security issue of DJI being headquartered in China, and which has resulted in the government and many others not being able to use DJI. It came out of stealth at Interdrone earlier this year. And the company's future vision is to electrify air travel. I look forward to working with many of you in the future, and if I can ever be helpful, please don't hesitate to reach out. I've put my email on the screen. Yes, I got that handle. space@bvp.com. And I'm just absolutely delighted that we're living in a time where we all may travel in a vertical takeoff and landing or a flying car. And until that becomes ubiquitous, I'll continue to invest in, encourage, and support founders and companies that are working towards making that a reality. So I look forward to your questions, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Tess. That was incredibly informative, and thanks for going into detail in the various aspects and process of funding. One of the questions we have is if you can actually just walk us through the exact funding process at BVP. What does it look like from the first conversation to close? And how do we get your attention? What should we include in our very first communications with BVP?
Two great questions. So I'm going to start with getting my attention and then the steps towards investment. I go to tons of conferences, so would love to meet you there. Or if you reach out cold, I will respond to all of those emails, or warm intro. Those are our two very easy ways to definitely get my attention. And the steps towards Bessemer making an investment in one's company. If you email me, hopefully you'll include a pitch deck or some material that I can do my homework and learn before a meeting. We'll have a meeting just one-on-one. And we love to provide radically candid feedback in a timely manner. So I will let you know very quickly if it is or is not a fit. And if it's not, the specific reason as to why it's not, we're not shy to share. But if it is, then I dig into the due diligence. So that can take, or that can be as quick as a week if you're moving quickly and we're really excited and things go well. But I'd love to dig into all the things on the due diligence slide, specifically chat with a lot of your customers. I love talking to the company's customers because when they become the champion or the customer advocate and they're selling the product to me, that's when I know it's definitely found its home. And that can take, that'll process will go. And you'll come in, pitch the entire partnership, which is a global office and a Monday partnership meeting, and we'll determine from there if it's a good fit.
And so Tess, given that many of our GoFly innovators and teams will not necessarily have customers at this point because they're still developing their models and their prototypes, what else do you look at for due diligence? What else should the teams be prepared to offer to you in the diligence process?
Great question, and yes, at such an early stage, of course, you don't have customers to chat with, but you have future potential of who it might be, and I think you should already be chatting with these people. I think it's important to always have conversations, whether they're current or future customers at every stage, because you're designing it for this end user, so you should be chatting with the end user, even if you're in preliminary CAD or you're super early in the design specifications of the technology, but making sure the tech works. So at a really early stage, when it's when we first invested in Rocket Lab and with Impossible and Iris right now, we dug into, does this technology, so does this Electron rocket or the Rutherford engine really work? Does this computer vision into a deep learning algorithm, and the engineer in me, of course, loves that, but really digging into, is this technically feasible? And does this team have the right skills and talent to get this technology to work?
Great. And then you also mentioned a pitch deck. We should send you an email that includes our pitch deck. what should be in that deck? You had mentioned that we should obviously be talking about who's on our team. But what else do you want to be able to see? And how long is too long? What is sort of that sort of sweet spot for the pitch deck and the information that we're providing to you?
The pitch deck at a high level should have 4 things: the problem, the solution, potential customers, and the team. And the length of it should, unfortunately, you should have multiple versions, whether it's a 5-minute elevator pitch where you're just conveniently ran into someone and you want to tell them about your company, all the way up to an hour meeting. Typically, meetings are 45 minutes to an hour for the first meeting, but the VC will probably interrupt you many a times with questions or comments during the meeting, and it's very much more of a conversation. So a variety of different, but as long as your deck has enough content for 30 minutes plus a conversation before and or after, that is a good sweet spot.
And then given that most of us are in the prototype phase, we're developing our models, do you want to be able to see a video? Should we offer you something visual in addition to the pitch deck?
Please. As you could see in this presentation, I love videos. So definitely would love. I love when companies bring props. I hate to use the word prop. When they have something to show. When Spencer from Impossible Aerospace, the CEO, first came in, he dropped one of the drones on the table. I mean, of course, that is a very exciting object to put something to reality. But if you don't have any physical devices, a video of, or a walkthrough of your CAD, if you have a digital version of it, or a video of a simulation of how you envision your technology or product to be like in the future, any added detail in that regard, please.
Okay. So this question has come up in a couple of different ways. Given that GoFly innovators are early stage startups for the most part, and the VTOL industry is new, particularly what we are trying to do through this competition. How do we figure out the valuation of the industry, and how do we consider the future valuation of our own companies? Do you have benchmarks that we should be looking at? Are there resources that we can reference? We don't want to be out of the ballpark, but we also want to make sure that the valuation reflects the current marketplace.
That is such a wonderful question, and that's what makes my job so incredibly difficult, and obviously your all job as well. In this, it's very easy to measure a market that is already there and has historical data of the growth of the market. So even, I'll make a very close analogy, but like the consumer, commercial, or military drone market, various reports state that will be $100 billion in 2022. 70 billion of that is military, 13 of that is commercial, and 17 is consumer. But the commercial is growing, the commercial segment's growing the quickest or the fastest. But that's because these sorts of under 55-pound drone hardware, they've been around for a while. And then you have historical data and the slope, so the B-intercept and the slope of the line to determine these. With flying VTOL, people, you don't have a B-intercept. You don't have a slope. I empathize, and it's going to be a definite feat. So maybe, and I'm brainstorming or thinking out loud, this will be taking a part of the land-based model. So if you start from there and you're like, how many people drive from, and pardon me, because I'm in the Bay right now, so I'm going to make a Bay reference, but let's say from San Jose to San Francisco every day. And if I take that number of people and the part of that would benefit from a VTOL way of getting there, let's say that's 5%. depending on my unit economics of how cheap I can make it and the levers of time versus money. Then you extend that to the United States, the world, however I think that could be one way to start is because this is now a slice of a current existing market. However, you'd also have to add various applications or abilities that aren't now currently even realistic, but will be due to VTOL. And that's where it's important to do various, we call them scenario analyses or waterfalls. So let's say it just takes, it's just a handful of routes, regulation's really tough and we don't get there in the industry and the total market becomes X. And then the next one is regulation's a little bit better. The technology it doesn't go as quickly or we can't take as many people as we thought. So it goes to this market. And you go through the various, the situation that had happened, the probability of that happening, and then the outcome. So that can either be the market, and then you can back channel how much money or revenue or the value of your company from that. And then you multiply the probability with the either valuation of your company or market. And then, of course, by the end, you want your just goes nuts scenario. VTOL transportation becomes ubiquitous. Everybody every day is using this rather than Uber or Lyft or their own devices, and it's the next thing. And those are various ways to average all the potential scenarios of your market or the valuation of your company.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Tess.
That's a great question. It's a really hard problem. I spend many hours digging into those numbers. And does that make sense? Who knows?
Sure.
Sorry to interrupt again. Sorry.
No, please go ahead.
Whenever a company though, when a company does exit, so whether it goes public or it gets acquired, we always love looking back on, so we do scenarios analyses as investors, and we always love looking back on our memo from 2, 5, 10 years before to see how close our hypotheses were back then to, and what happened at the end. Sorry, go ahead.
Do you, and granted, we understand that this is a very difficult number to land on. Someone is curious if you have a ballpark number in mind. Is there a current sort of market valuation that you might give this particular industry that we are building, developing, and innovating on?
Unfortunately, not the top of my mind, but I'd be happy to go through a scenario analysis or a waterfall or talk that through.
Great. So we know that BVP is on the list of investors, on the interested investor list that's been made available to our phase 2 teams. And so can you share the process by which we should be in communication with you? You've offered an email address. What should we do to ensure that you see our email, and what should we include, again, particularly given that we are on this list, what can we make sure we include in this email to you so that we can move our conversations quickly and productively?
Yeah, definitely. Please feel free to email me if you have any questions, or I think it's important though to the stage of the VC. I'd love to start meeting and communicating with all the folks now, but if the GoFly teams are coming out of this competition or program, I think it'd be more appropriate for like a pre-seed or a seed investor to provide the first round of fundraising. That being said, your Series A is a year or two ahead, and we can start the conversation. I think it's important to know, and I should have mentioned this earlier in the talk, and I apologize for not doing so, but there are multiple ways for one to get funding. There are non-dilutive forms, so grants or SBIRs. And when I say non-dilutive, it's also important to note is a venture capitalist gives a company money in exchange for equity or ownership of the company. So if you don't want to give up that ownership, there's other ways of going about it as well. So non-dilutive grants, non-dilutive debt. So there's, just like you take out a chunk of change to buy a house or a loan, there's ways that Silicon Valley Bank and other banks work really well with startup companies to provide lines of credit for the company to continue on their journey. So venture capital is one part of that pie. To answer the question regarding, I've provided my email, what should I include in that email, who you are, a deck, and I really love, and this is what I would like to get from the meeting, a very specific action item. And hey, if you have like, I'd love to meet you and get your advice on X. In exchange, I know a lot about computer-aided engineering and would love to teach you about the new thing of CFD or FEA. Or, hey, I also know this really interesting company or person or investor or entrepreneur that I'd love to introduce you to. Those sorts of emails are my favorite. When I reach out to someone that I want their input or advice on, I always offer a way for me to help as well. And those mutually beneficial relationships.
Great. So just to clarify, you mentioned, obviously the different rounds of funding. To be clear, BVP comes in at the Series A round, at the seed round. At what level of funding do you generally come in?
I'm going to narrow this to our deep tech roadmap, which includes space and drones. Our sweet spot is a Series A. So there's maybe a dozen plus people on the team, and they've been working on the technology for 2 to 3 years. And we love to partner and invest at let's say the round is $5 to $15 million. And we love to lead those rounds with a leading term sheet. So the sweet spot for our deep tech space and drones is the Series A. I was general because every other investor here invests in every other industry there is at every other stage. So we all have our unique sweet spots. But to clarify, the deep tech, space drones, VTOL is the Series A.
Okay. And at what stage of technology, you mentioned a couple years in, you've gotten a bit of funding, but what about the tech itself? At what stage are you looking for it to be in at the Series A round? Prototype, subscale model, full scale model, at what stage does the tech need to be in order for you to be the lead funder in the Series A?
Yeah, that's a tough question because obviously the TRL varies so much depending on the type of technology you're developing. So how about this? We invested in Rocket Lab when it hadn't even done a suborbital test of the launch vehicle, which is basically hadn't even gone out of our atmosphere last year or earlier this year. It successfully deployed 4 CubeSats into orbit along with our own satellite, the Humanity Star. So that TRL, and yes, it was a rocket. So there was points that Peter Beck, the CEO, could tell us saying, next year, I'm going to static fire test the engine. The year after that, I'm going to go suborbital. The year after that, I'm going to launch once successfully. And now next year, he hopes to launch at a monthly cadence, and the year after at a weekly launch cadence, if not more. So it's not, okay, now that you have a prototype, or now that you did your PDR or your CDR, or it's having various milestones throughout the process and the journey that we can look to and make sure that they're achievable. With Impossible Aerospace, Spencer and the team had already manufactured and created the drone, and with 12 people in a year and a half, maybe 2, and he's ready to sell it. You can go on the website right now and buy the US one. So it's all a variety, and it all changes. But I'm not afraid to invest in a pre-revenue or a medium technology readiness level company, as long as it is realistic about how and when it'll get to the end deal.
Great. Thank you so much, Tess. Those are all the questions we have for now. But as you have offered your email address, we'll be sure and share that with the the innovators once again so they can be in touch with you.
Thank you so much, Nidhi. I really appreciate the questions. And thank you so much, Gwen, and the entire GoFly team for having me today. And I look forward to working with many of you again in the future.
Great. Tess, thank you from all of us at GoFly and all of our teams associated with GoFly. And actually, we are at 98 countries within our community. We have teams from 98 countries now, so that's wonderful. Congratulations to all of our teams. We very much thank you for the insight and the expertise that you provided today. Teams, as you all know, on our Phase 2 website, we have our interested investor list. Tess is one of the investors listed. Obviously, you have heard a great more details today in terms of what Bessemer is looking for and what Tess in particular is looking for. So that should be able to help you fine-tune your contacts to Tess and as well to other investors. Tess, thank you once again. Very informative. And to everyone, we wish you a very happy Halloween and look forward to seeing you at our next master lecture. Take care, all.
Thank you.